We're always set up to be deployed, which means that we would have to pack up. As a dental company, we would have to go with wherever they went, the squadron. So, but we never did leave Japan, Iwakuni. But there was always that opportunity.
Were you in any relationship before or during your time of service?
Relationships?
Yeah. Like girlfriend?
Yeah, I dated someone. Her name was Yoko, and which is, she was actually Korean, and she lived there. And it actually that was another part of learning about culture, is and I think probably that's one of the things you learn when you're involved overseas is there was because of the Korean War, that the Japanese were involved in that, and there was some bitterness between the Japanese and the Koreans that still I don't know if it prevails today, but it prevailed in the 70s. There was she was Korean and she was in a certain section of Japan, and wanted to come. Actually, she wanted to come to the U.S. and she wanted to get out of there because the opportunities weren't as favorable if you were Korean. So there was a certain prejudice that went on, in that culture. So it was a learning experience. It was. I think I might have gone on a couple other dates, but she was the longest one I dated.
Were you treated differently by Japanese people when you lived there?
Yeah, when I went out to eat with Japanese people, because I was involved in that cultural association, and also when we did our work with the orphanage kids, we also were involved with the staff that worked with them. So we would go out, and they were very hospitable. There was a barrier, even though I learned some Japanese. There was a barrier because a lot of Japanese couldn't speak English very well, even though English was a second language with most Japanese. There wasn't many Americans or many people that could speak English, so they had to they couldn't use the language that much. So there was a barrier with the language.
Did you learn any Japanese?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, enough to get around. I had a car, so I drove around. I also lived in town, in the town of Iwakuni. I lived in the village, so I was able to get involved with the local community.
What are some things you learned from other people in the Navy? Did you learn anything important?
Well, a lot of things, yeah. I think one of the things I really remember very distinctly is that there were several Afro-Americans that was in my squadron, and I got to really understand a lot of their culture, just by being in the same company. And that was it was a very rewarding experience, just getting to know, how they felt culturally about being in the military and their lifestyle. So I was able to meet very different people, which I couldn't in a small town of growing up in South Hadley. I didn't have that opportunity. So I met some, people from lots of different areas. One of my best friends was from Southern California, and he was a very interesting person. In training, he was a flagman. Okay,
Have you kept in touch with anyone?
No, I did for a little while. One of my friends was a corpsman, and he lived out in Fairfax, Virginia, and I went to visit him a couple times, but I haven't been in touch with him for quite a while. now, but the first 5 years I was in touch with him.
When you left the Navy, how was your like lookout life? Did you feel different?
Yeah, well, I was glad to. I don't think I was the type of person that wanted to make a living in the military, and I enjoyed traveling, but I was glad to be out of it. You know, I wanted to be out on my own and be independent. So, but overall, the travel experience was great. I got to travel through to Thailand and the Philippines, and so that was a really good experience. I was able to meet lots of different people there, and see how those cultures were.
How did your parents feel about you joining the Navy?
I think they were worried, like any parents would be. But my dad, I think, was proud that I think that I went in the Navy because he was a Navy man. So I think he appreciated that and went in. I don't know if he really understood the conscientious objector part when I became a conscientious objector, but that was part of my personality. I mean, I didn't. But I think he appreciated me going in. I think after a while he began to understand that aspect of myself. But anyway.
What was the like? What would you go back? If you were younger?
Well, no, I love to go back to Japan. I mean, I think.
Well, like, would you join the army again?
Well, the Navy,
yeah.
you know, I would. I mean, I always would like to. I mean, my view of defending is quite different than it was then. I don't know how easily it'd be for me to want to shoot someone, but I think I would always want to help defend our country against somebody that was invading it. But it would have to be something that I feel is a undeniable threat to us directly. One of the problems with the period I went in, Vietnam was a very confusing war, and and I knew a lot of people that were coming back from the war. I got a chance to meet several people coming back, and they were very confused because after a while, nobody knew who they were fighting or why they were fighting. So, if I were to go back in, the only reason why I would go back in is to if our country is definitely if there was a reason for us to protect our sovereign nation. I mean, otherwise it would have to be something very concrete.
Mm-hmm. Are there conscientious objectors around now? Do you know?
Well, there always was. There was in World War II, and there probably was in the Civil War. Every war there's conscientious objectors, and I think that I'm glad you asked that question because I think it's important that you have people that object to it. Otherwise, the military would run rampant of just of warmongers. Not necessarily warmongers, I shouldn't say that, but people that I think you'd have to have that. I think it's important, and I imagine that a lot of doctors or people in the medical field wouldn't want to shoot someone else. I mean, that's not their practice. And there's probably a lot of people that join the military, or especially during the Vietnam era, that wasn't a volunteer military. You were drafted, and there were a lot of people that were going in there probably didn't want to be in there. And the same thing happened during World War I and World War II. I think that there were a lot of conscientious objectors in all of those wars, and I think it was very important that you had those people questioning, because it made people think about what they were doing. I think it's important to have people that are willing to make their point of view make their point of view. Yeah.
What was the environment like around in Japan that you lived in? Was it like...
Well, when I traveled around the countryside, lots of times I was with somebody else. I mean, I would always wonder what Japanese people, what they were thinking about or how they looked at us. Fortunately, I didn't have to wear a uniform when I went out within the Japanese culture, and I became a regular in some of the local Japanese restaurants. And I think, if I recall, at least part of it, I had a beard. Fortunately, in the Navy, we were allowed to have long-haired beards. So Admiral Zumwalt was in office, and so that was good because when I went out into the Japanese culture, I looked like I could be a tourist rather than a military person. Mm-hmm. So that was very helpful in me just being able to mix into the culture. So that was a good experience, a good way of getting to know people in a way that they didn't know directly that I was in the military. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, I didn't have to wear a uniform when I was out in public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you going to college at that point, or did you go to college after?
Yeah, I took classes with the University of Maryland. I don't know if the Army and Air Force and those branches had the same courses, but I was able to take different courses. I took English and a few other courses from the University of Maryland, and they were taught by people that had degrees who were able to teach a class. So yeah, I got credit from the University of Maryland. I think I took 3 or 4 classes, 4 courses. So that was a good experience.
Did going to the Navy affect your choice in careers?
Yeah, I think when I got out, I thought more about the visual arts, and then I met Leanne, my wife, and she was in the visual arts, so that just kind of reinforced that whole thing. But I think because Japan is such a culturally, it's such a beautifully visual place because of the Japanese gardens and beautiful architecture. That kind of got me more and more interested in the visual arts. Yeah, but it was a great experience. I actually was supposed to be there just for a year, and I extended my duty for an extra half a year. So I was there for 18 months.
Why did you extend it?
Because I liked the culture. I just wanted to spend some more time there.
Did you do things other than teach English for voluntary work?
Well, we did some dental work, and then we also, if there were any like problems, there's one occasion where we there was a small flood. They had typhoons and stuff like that, and we had to help people, kind of help them with things and stuff like that. So, yeah. So we were involved in a lot of things with the local culture. That was part of, actually, it's part of the, which I don't know if a lot of people realize it is part of the military culture too. It's not just for battle, but it's also to help people. I think that was part I appreciated about the military.
Okay. Well, thank you for doing the interview.
Yeah.